Sold for meat, human. Hold me. Use me. Just get me out of here, she whispered.
Tarnus Verge wasn't dead, but it was dying in plain sight. Beneath the skeletal frames of half-collapsed vendor stalls, snow mixed with oily soot clung to everything like skin mold. The reek of rusted batteries and old blood hung in the air. A maintenance drone buzzed overhead, broken and stuck in a circular pattern, its dying audio loop muttering something unintelligible about trade certifications. Shawthorne zipped up his heat-sealed collar and kept walking, one hand gripping the strap of his satchel, the other curled deep in his coat pocket. His boots crunched against frozen slush, his pace steady and quiet. He wasn't here to trade. He never was. Shaw had worked for the defunct Planetary Records Bureau for 18 years, long enough to see the census stations shut down, then repurposed into apartment blocks for the quietly forgotten. He lived alone in one of the upper alcoves now, sealing climate leaks and running old population logs just to justify his food allotment. He came down to the Verge twice a week, scavenging for expired rations or salvageable tech cores to barter. He never strayed past Sector F. But that night, with daylight bleeding out behind the collapsed skyline and snow thickening under the neon haze, something pulled him further into G12. He noticed the heat signature first, a pale shimmer through his visor HUD, tucked behind a curtain of hanging tarp. Active generators. Someone was still selling out here. His stomach tensed. He should have turned back. Instead, he stepped between two rusted fence columns and entered the shadow of a once official auction floor. It was small, maybe 15 meters across, with broken display screens and warped cages welded to the platform. Several cages were open, hinges bent, tags scorched. A single trader sat beside a thermal burner at the far end, legs stretched, smoking a wrapped coil. His jacket was too clean for this place. Synthetic fur lining. Former Union stock. Likely ex-militia turned merchant. Shaw kept his hands visible as he approached, his shoulders squared, every part of him saying, "I'm not here to steal." The man barely looked up. "Late run, huh? You're not customs, are you?" "No." "Then pick fast. I'm packing up." Shaw stopped in front of a cage, not yet opened. Inside, curled on her knees, was a woman. Alien. Zyrene Allen hybrid, from what he could tell. Pale violet skin. Long white hair tangled over her face and shoulders. Her wrists were bound together with oxidized clamps. Thin metallic bands, barely garments, were looped across her chest and hips. Her knees were bruised. She was barefoot, unmoving, her breath visible in the air. Shaw exhaled slowly. The rusted tag read, "Gray beef female. Non-compliant. Too difficult to train. Clearance or meat. 400 credits." He turned to the trader. "You're selling her for slaughter?" The man shrugged. "She didn't bond. Screamed at everyone. Bit a client. Nobody wants to train that kind of attitude. That skin tone might pull a good cut rate, though. Not much fat. Lean muscle. She goes to butcher by shift change, unless you're offering." Shaw felt his jaw tighten. "That's legal. Depends on the zone." The man tapped his burner coil. "But no one checks this far out. You want her? Make an offer. If not, don't waste my heat." Shaw looked back at the woman. She was staring at him now, eyes barely open, violet irises ringed with fine silver. Not pleading, not begging, just watching. Her lips were cracked. Her voice came out dry. "They sold me for meat," she whispered. He froze. Her voice was hoarse but clear. She looked at him with full awareness. "Human, hold me. Use me, just get me out of here." Shaw looked away for a second. The snow outside was falling harder, sticking to the tarp behind him. No patrols were coming. No one cared who lived or died in Verge Sector G12. If he walked away now, she'd be dead in hours, cut apart, labeled, processed. But she wasn't asking for help. She was offering herself as payment. He hated that. "I don't want to." She flinched. Not from him. From his silence. From rejection. Shaw turned back to the trader. 300. 4. She's got both kidneys. Shaw's eyes narrowed. "You were going to gut her. Don't pretend she's worth more now." The trader chuckled. "You're a bureaucrat, aren't you? 350. Right now. No questions. You wiped the record." The man hesitated, then pulled a data stub from his jacket and scanned Shaw's tag chip. "Done. Take her." I don't bag the unprocessed ones. Shaw stepped forward. The cage opened with a groan. The woman flinched again, but didn't pull back. When he offered his hand, she stared at it like it was a trap. "It's cold out here," he said softly. "You'll need your strength." She moved slowly, her knees shaking. She took his coat when he slipped it off, draped it over her shoulders, then gripped it with both bound hands. Her fingers were raw. Her skin was warm. She leaned into him just enough to stand. He didn't ask her name. They didn't speak as they left the floor. He walked slowly. She walked beside him, barefoot, coat dragging, her steps uneven. No one stopped them. No one watched. Just the sound of their footsteps disappearing into snow and shadow. The apartment wasn't much, just a narrow corner unit in an old census tower converted long ago into silent residential blocks. On the 6th floor, Shaw keyed in the analog override and pulled the insulated door open with his shoulder. Heat hissed softly from the seals as they stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by a few wall strips patched together from salvage. Pale orange light glowed across worn floor panels, a heat coil running low along the perimeter walls. Blankets were piled against the corners for insulation, and in the center of the unit was a low thermal table covered with data slates, ration packets, and stripped electronics. Aurelian stood near the entrance, her eyes adjusting slowly. She kept the coat wrapped tightly around her. Her bare feet remained pressed to the threshold, her weight shifting toward the exit, just slightly, not ready to assume this was safety. Shaw didn't speak. He stepped out of his boots, pulled the seal lever on the door until it hissed shut, then walked over to the small prep station in the corner. He opened a storage bin, retrieved a sealed thermal meal pack, and slipped it into the heater slot. He didn't ask if she was hungry. He didn't need to. As the heater hummed to life, he turned around. She hadn't moved. "You can sit down," he said. No response. She looked past him, at the blankets, at the heater, at the sealed windows, but not directly at him. Her hands gripped the coat harder. He reached into the drawer, retrieved a hand tool, and knelt by her. "Let me get these off." She tensed as he touched her wrist clamps, but didn't pull away. The bindings were old, scavenged slave market type. Cheap. He wedged the tool into the first clamp. A loud pop, then the second. Her wrists stayed together a moment, even after the clamps were gone. Out of habit, slowly, she let them fall to her sides. The skin beneath the bands was raw, bruised. She said nothing. "You should eat," he said. Shaw motioned toward the table as the heater clicked finished. He opened the packet and placed the warm tray down. A thick, reconstituted vegetable mash. High-calorie paste. Not pleasant, but hot. Aurelian moved slowly, sat on the floor instead of the bench. Her eyes stayed on the food, but her hands didn't move toward it. "Is it drugged?" she asked, voice soft. "No." A pause. She picked up the tray and took a bite. Cautious. Then another. Faster. Shaw sat across from her, but didn't eat. He watched her posture. Tight, shoulders still raised, like she hadn't accepted that her cage was gone. He didn't say anything about her clothes or what she'd offered at the auction, but it was hanging in the air between them. After a few minutes, she looked up. "Why did you take me?" He took his time answering. "Because no one else was going to." "That's not an answer. I didn't want to leave you there." She studied him carefully. "You didn't want to use me?" His jaw tensed. "No." She set the tray down slowly. "But I told you you could." "That doesn't make it right." She tilted her head slightly. Her white hair fell forward, catching the heater's low glow. "Then why am I here?" Shaw exhaled and leaned back against the bench frame. "I don't know yet, but I wasn't going to walk away." She didn't respond. Her eyes flicked around the room again, mapping it, judging exits. She seemed sharper now, not just afraid, but observant, strategic. It made sense. Survival demanded that. "Your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Aurelian." "Mine's Shaw." She nodded once. "Are you military?" "No." "You knew how to open the clamps." "I work with old tech. Inventory systems. Same lock types." She didn't speak again. The silence stretched out. The heater coil buzzed. Then quietly, "If I had been less pretty, would you still have taken me?" The question landed hard. Shaw didn't answer right away. His voice, when it came, was steady but low. "I don't know. Maybe not. I saw you. I listened. I made a choice. I'm not going to pretend I'm above all that. She didn't look offended. That seemed to calm her more than false kindness would have. She stood up and walked toward the rear alcove, a half-curtained space with a heat blanket and a thin sleeping pad. Can I stay here tonight? Yes. I won't scream. You don't have to promise that. She didn't close the curtain. She didn't remove the coat. She just curled down on the pad, knees to chest, facing the wall. Her hands gripped the blanket like a shield. Shaw stayed by the heater until the power coil dimmed. Then he moved to the other end of the room, lay on the spare mat, and pulled his own cover over. He didn't sleep for hours, because in the dim quiet, something was gnawing inside him. Not just guilt or confusion, but the awareness that she didn't understand yet. She thought she still had to be useful to survive, and he didn't know if he was strong enough to teach her otherwise. The heater cycled back to life just after sunrise. Thin light bled through the taped plastic sheeting that covered the single window, casting soft yellow stripes across the floor. Shaw stirred from the mat, blinking at the ceiling, every muscle sore. He hadn't truly slept, just drifted in and out of shallow rest, the way you do when you don't fully trust your own home to stay quiet. He sat up slowly. The blanket across the far alcove was folded neatly now. His coat was draped over a chair. The floor was swept. Even the utensils he'd left out were cleaned and stacked on the counter. Aurelian was awake, somewhere in the room. He found her near the hygiene unit. The narrow chamber wasn't sealed. It was just a curtain and a cracked composite basin linked to the main tank below. She was crouched next to the exposed pipe, warming water in a basin using a heat stick he'd left beside it months ago. She was still wearing the coat, barely. It hung open now, loose around her shoulders, revealing the silver bands underneath. Her back was strong. Smooth lines of muscle shifted along her shoulder blades as she dipped a cloth into the steaming water. She noticed him watching but didn't cover herself. Instead, she said, "You don't lock your doors when you sleep." "I did," he replied. "Manual override. I could have found it." "Did you?" She paused. "No." He didn't answer. He stepped toward the counter, made himself busy refilling the heater with a new meal pack. His hand lingered on the control dial a little too long. Behind him, water dripped back into the basin. "I cleaned everything," she said. "You let me stay, so I cleaned." "You don't have to earn your place here," he said without turning around. "I know, but I don't know what else to do." The heater beeped. He slid the tray out and set it on the table. She stood and walked over. The coat had fallen from one shoulder. Her collarbone was wet, catching the light. She wasn't trying to seduce him, but she also wasn't hiding. She sat on the edge of the bench, across from him, and didn't touch the food. He finally looked her in the eye. She asked, "Why haven't you touched me?" Shaw froze. She wasn't angry or flirtatious. Her tone was plain, curious, quiet. He took a breath. "Because I didn't bring you here for that. But that's what I offered. I didn't accept." She leaned forward. "You don't want me?" "I didn't say that either." "Then I don't understand." Her voice didn't rise, but something was pressing underneath. Confusion, not manipulation. She looked down at her own skin, at the bare parts, at the lines where bruises were fading. Then back at him. "Everywhere I've been," she said, "everything I've survived has taught me one thing. The only reason someone lets you live is because you're giving them something. Use. Flesh. Labor. It doesn't matter. You pay or you die." Shaw stared at her. "You're not paying me, but I don't know how to stop trying." He sat back in the chair, shoulders heavy. "I'm not a good man. I'm not noble. I don't have submission. I don't have anyone. I live alone in a building full of ghosts. And the truth is, I don't know why I stopped. I saw you in that cage, and I couldn't keep walking." Silence stretched. "You looked at me," she said finally. "Not my body. At me." He nodded once. "That scared me." She blinked. "Why?" "Because I didn't know if I could do anything real with that. If I'd only end up hurting you by pretending I could." They sat there, still. The heater coil ticked as it cooled. She reached forward, slowly, took the tray, ate 3 bites in silence, then set it aside and stood. She didn't go back to the alcove. Instead, she crossed the small space between them and knelt in front of his chair, folding her legs beneath her. "I'm not offering myself," she said quietly. "I'm asking. If it's allowed, can I be held?" Shaw stared at her, not her chest. not at her legs. He saw her face, calm but trembling under the surface. Her lips pressed together, her eyes searching for refusal. He reached forward and laid his hands gently on her arms, pulled her forward, not fast, not possessive, just enough to bring her into his lap. She rested her cheek against his chest. Her breathing slowed. She didn't say anything else. Neither did he. The apartment was quiet, and in that silence, something began. Not desire, not lust, not ownership, but a fragile new shape of presence, of being near another body, not for transaction, not for survival, but for warmth. Something neither of them had felt in years. The days blurred together in quiet patterns. Heat coils cycled on and off. Ration packs steamed in the heater. Light from the window shifted from yellow to gray and back again. Tarnis Verge remained silent outside. No alarms, no patrols, no voices. Just snow on metal and wind against sealed glass. Inside the apartment, Aurelian began to move more freely. She no longer asked for permission to stand, to wash, to eat. She opened the curtain now without hesitation. She used the basin in the hygiene stall with the door drawn shut. She slept in the main room, not tucked into a corner like a stowaway. Sometimes, she even left her hair down. But Shaw noticed things. When he dropped a tool by accident, she flinched, just for a moment, a slight hitch in her breath. When he moved too quickly to retrieve a data slate or turned sharply to speak, her body would subtly shift backward, away from his reach. She never said anything about it. She smiled when he handed her food. She thanked him softly when he found a warmer thermal wrap for her to sleep under. But her nervous system wasn't convinced she was safe. He saw in her shoulders, always slightly braced, and he knew better than to bring it up directly. Instead, he changed how he moved. No sudden reaches, no raised voice, even when annoyed at a failing processor. He always announced when he was walking behind her. She noticed, late one evening, when the heating coil was on low and both were seated on opposite ends of the floor mat with a tray of scavenged fruit between them, she spoke. "You walk differently now." He glanced over. "Yeah. You don't come close unless you say something first. Figured you'd prefer that. I didn't ask for it. I didn't wait to be asked." She picked at the rind of the fruit. Her fingers were steadier now. Not perfect, but not trembling. "Did you live with someone before?" she asked. Shaw leaned back against the bench, folding his hands behind his head. "A long time ago. Human. Yeah. Civil registry technician. We lived together for 4 years. What happened? She got assigned off-world. I didn't want to go. I thought this place still had a future." Aurelian tilted her head. "Did it?" Shaw looked around the apartment. The peeling wall panels, the patched window, the broken light strip that hadn't worked in years. "No," he said, "but I stayed anyway." She didn't ask anything else. Later that night, while cleaning the hygiene basin, she paused beside the open heater coil and removed her top wrappings for the first time. Shaw saw her reflection in the cracked stainless wall. Not in a way meant to provoke. Just the shape of her back, her shoulders, her neck exposed as she leaned over to scrub a cloth across her collarbone. Her skin looked healthier, more color in it now. Her breathing was relaxed. Then the cloth slipped. She caught it mid-fall, but the sudden motion sent a loud clank through the basin. Shaw looked up sharply, just instinct, and immediately regretted it. Aurelian flinched, not violently, but enough that her shoulders locked and her head ducked slightly, like a reflex she hadn't chosen. Shaw stood slowly and approached, careful with each step. "I'm not going to yell," he said quietly. I just looked up. She didn't move. Her arms hung stiff at her sides. "You okay?" he asked. A long pause. "I don't know yet," she said. Shaw reached down and picked up the cloth. "That's all right." He handed it back. She took it slowly, carefully, and finally looked up at him, eyes wide, alert but not afraid. Just watching again, like she had back in a cage. "I forget sometimes," she said, "that I don't have to prepare for being hurt. You can forget that here. That's not how memory works," she said. He nodded. "No, it isn't." She wrapped the cloth around her shoulders and walked back to the pad. This time, she didn't sleep curled up. She lay flat on her back, one arm resting over her stomach. Shaw lay on his own mat, staring at the ceiling, listening to the heater cycle. He didn't feel like a savior. He felt like a man learning how to keep another human being from breaking further. And that, somehow, felt heavier than anything he'd done before. The weather module on Shaw's wall panel flickered red for the third day in a row. Surface temperature -31. Visibility near zero. Acid particulate levels rising. Outside, Tarnis Verge was buried beneath gray-white snow. Whole districts had vanished under the storms. No one came up the tower stairs. No one knocked. The apartment felt sealed in time. Aurelian was the first to wake now. She moved quietly, but not like before, not like prey. She made her own tea by heating water in the coil basin. She reused one of Shaw's cracked cups and wiped it dry before setting it down. She no longer asked before opening cabinets or drawers. She knew where things were now. She claimed the space without ever needing permission. That morning, Shaw sat at the thermal table, slowly repairing a broken fuse link from the wall heater. He was focused, hand steady, eyes squinting through a cracked magnifier lens. Then she walked out of the sleeping alcove, wearing only one of his shirts. Long-sleeved, gray, loosely buttoned, nothing underneath. The hem barely reached her upper thighs. One side slipped off her shoulder. The cuffs dangled below her wrists. Her skin was still damp from washing. Her white hair hung straight down her back, catching the warm glow of the coil. She didn't say anything. She crossed the room, bare feet silent on the floor. She poured herself tea, sat across from him at the table, and sipped. Calm, present. Her eyes didn't search for approval. She didn't fidget or tug the shirt down. She was simply there. Shaw felt his pulse quicken, not because of what she wore, but because of what she didn't do. She didn't offer herself, didn't frame it as a trade. She just existed beside him, vulnerable, visible, and not hiding. He forced himself to keep working. After a while, she said, "Do you want me to change?" "No." "Do you want me like this?" He hesitated. "Set the magnifier down. I want you comfortable." "I'm not talking about comfort." Shaw looked up. Her legs were crossed. The shirt had shifted again. Her skin glowed softly in the heat light. He swallowed. "Then what are you talking about?" "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "Not of you." "That doesn't mean—" "I'm not asking for permission to survive," she interrupted gently. "I'm asking if you see me." He couldn't answer right away. His throat felt tight. He stood and walked to the counter, poured himself water, drank, didn't look back until he was steady. When he turned around, she was still seated, eyes on him, still calm, still waiting. "I see you," he said. She stood up, walked over to him, and stopped just short of touching. "Then can I ask something else?" He nodded. She took his hand and placed it on the bare side of her hip under the shirt. Her skin was warm. "Steady. Touch me," she whispered. "Because you want to, not because I owe it." Shaw didn't move, not for a long moment. Then, very slowly, he wrapped both arms around her, held her close. She leaned into his chest, letting out a soft breath. Not relief, not fear, but something quieter, something real. He didn't lead her to the pad. He didn't undress her. He just held her, and she didn't pull away. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the heater coil and the weight of two bodies remembering what it meant to be human. Not through sex, not through ownership, but through presence. They stood there for a long time. No words, no expectations, just heat, closeness, and a quiet acceptance of something that had stopped being survival and become a choice. A week passed. The storm didn't break, but inside the apartment, a different kind of weather took hold. Warmer, slower, strange in its normality. They lived together. Aurelian wore his shirts every day now, often with nothing beneath. Not to provoke, not to bargain, but because she liked how they hung loose on her frame, how they absorbed the scent of heat and linen, how they made her feel less like someone owned and more like someone who belonged. She moved without hesitation. Opened shelves, sorted old food packets, wiped down walls that hadn't been cleaned in years. She began stacking things, small piles of folded cloth, aligned tools, separated waste from reusable metal. One morning, she stood in front of the sink with a broken food bin in her hands and asked, "Can I plant something in this?" Shaw blinked. "You want to grow something?" I don't know, she said. I just want something green in here. Something alive. He looked at the container. It had no drainage. The light was poor. The dust was acidic. You won't get much, he said. Not here, but might try, she replied. They spent that afternoon mixing dry soil from the building's rooftop collectors with reprocessed nutrient gel. He found an old packet of seed stock in the back of his drawer. Label worn off, probably dead. She buried them anyway and set the bin under the patch of sun that bled through the tarp-covered window. The next day, she cooked. Not well, but with focus. She combined 2 ration packs, added water, stirred with a salvaged plastic rod. The taste was bland, but she insisted Shaw sit while she plated it. She didn't ask if it was good. She just watched him eat. When he finished, she smiled faintly and said, "Now I've done something that isn't selling myself." Shaw stared at his empty tray. His appetite vanished beneath a knot in his chest. He was beginning to realize something he hadn't prepared for. She was healing. Quickly. Not just physically, but in how she held herself. How she spoke. She had opinions now. She argued over storage. She teased him when he forgot to filter water. She stretched in the morning by the heater like a cat, limbs long and strong again. And with every moment of recovery came a quiet fear. He was no longer necessary. She didn't need protection anymore. What if she left? What if she stepped out that door one morning, walked back into Tarnus Verge, and disappeared? She'd be smarter now. Quieter. She wouldn't get caught again. Maybe she'd find work. Or shelter. Or someone else. Someone better than a tired man with bad posture in a room full of broken tech logs. That night, Shaw sat alone at the edge of his sleeping mat, staring at a cracked photo frame. Nothing inside. He'd removed the picture years ago. Just the frame itself. A placeholder for something that used to matter. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Bare. Light. Then her voice. "Why are you sad?" He didn't turn. "I'm not. You've been quiet all day. Just tired." She sat beside him, cross-legged, still in his shirt, the collar half-buttoned. "You think I'll leave," she said. His head turned, sharply. She wasn't accusing. She was stating. "I can see it on your face," she added. "You're preparing to be alone again." He looked down. "I don't want to trap you here." "You didn't. I didn't rescue you either. I bought you. You stopped them from butchering me." He didn't answer. She reached forward and placed her hand on his chest. Her touch was firm, steady. "You didn't save me. You gave me a room with a door I can open from the inside." That line hit him hard. Not poetic, just real. She leaned in, resting her head against his shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "For now," he murmured. "For as long as this feels like home." Shaw closed his eyes. His hand reached up, hesitated, then gently rested against her back. Not possessive, just there. He understood something then. This wouldn't last because she owed him or because he gave her shelter. It would last only as long as they chose to stay. Every morning, every night, again and again. It wasn't permanent, but it was real. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The storm broke on the 14th morning. Outside the tarp-covered window, the snow had stopped falling. The wind fell silent, replaced by the distant crackling of melting frost sliding down rusted pipes. The gray sky over Tarnus Verge remained thick, but it was no longer violent, just still. Cold, but survivable. Inside the apartment, the silence felt different. Shaw stood at the window, peeling back the corner of the plastic sheeting for the first time in days. Below, the vendor stalls were barely visible under thick white drifts. No traders, no movement, just wreckage and frost. Soft light pressing down on a forgotten district. The kind of quiet that comes after collapse. Behind him, the apartment was warm. The heater coil hummed at medium. The room was cleaner than it had been in years. The makeshift plant bin sat by the window. Inside, for small green sprouts had broken through the soil. He wasn't the only one looking. Aurelian crouched beside it, one hand hovering just above the new growth, not touching it, just letting her body's warmth hover over the life pushing upward. She didn't speak until he turned to look at her. "You said nothing would grow here." "I was wrong," he replied. She stood, brushing dust off her hands, and crossed the room. She wore pants now, his old cargo pair rolled twice at the ankles, and the same gray shirt loosely buttoned. Her hair was pulled back with a thread of cloth. Her skin had a healthy glow again. Her posture was different. Still tall, still alert, but no longer tense. "I want to see the outside," she said. "Just once." Shaw hesitated. "It's still cold." "I know." He nodded. They layered up. Old coats, patch-wrap boots, gloves stiff from age. Shaw handed her a scarf and a rebreather mask. She slipped both on with practiced ease, then paused by the door. "Together?" she asked. He opened it. The stairwell was freezing but intact. They walked in silence, boots echoing against metal steps. At ground level, Shaw pushed the outer door open, letting in a gust of sharp air. Ice cracked under their soles as they stepped outside. The street was a ruin, but beautiful in its own strange way. The storm had smoothed the broken edges. Snow covered burnt plastic and shattered glass. The sky was a pale gray dome. Across the way, the auction platform was half collapsed, cages buried. The sign was gone, just steel bones left behind. Aurelian walked to the edge of the market row. She stopped, stared at the spot where her cage had once stood. Shaw stood beside her. Not close, not touching. She turned to him, pulled the mask off. Her breath steamed. "I was going to die here." He nodded. "And now?" She looked around, then up at the tower behind them. "I want to stay." They returned to the apartment before the wind picked up again. Inside, she peeled off her layers, her hands pink from the cold, her lips dry. Shaw lit the coil stove. She moved beside him and placed a pan down, adding water and ration blend, stirring with the same old rod she'd used days earlier. They didn't talk while cooking. Later, after they ate, she sat beside him on the sleeping pad. No ceremony, no tension. She pulled off her shirt slowly, not as an offer, not as payment, but as a statement. She touched his face gently and leaned in. They made love quietly without rush. No orders, no permission, no fear, just skin against skin, heat in a cold world. Two people relearning how to breathe with someone else beside them. She didn't flinch when he touched her waist. He didn't hesitate when she traced his chest. It was not a transaction. It wasn't rescue. It was real. Later, she lay across his chest, fingers trailing down his forearm. "I'm still afraid sometimes," she whispered. "Me too," he replied. "What if this fades? Then we hold on to it harder." She smiled, eyes half closed. Outside, the frost had stopped climbing the glass. The plant bin sat in the sunlight, 4 green shoots stretching slowly upward, growing not because someone demanded it, but because the conditions finally allowed it. A life not owed, not traded, just chosen, together. The snow outside never truly stopped. It just softened. Days passed. The worst of the cold had settled into the bones of Tarnis Verge, but life inside Shaw's apartment no longer felt like survival. It felt like routine, like peace. The apartment had changed in small ways. Clean walls, tools arranged in labeled bins. The heater coil now reinforced with a double plate for even warmth. Aurelian had strung 2 pieces of tarp cloth across the rear wall to create a soft visual divide between the sleeping area and the living space. It wasn't a boundary, just comfort. The sprouts by the window had doubled in size. Every morning, she knelt beside them and checked moisture. She had started talking to them, softly, privately. Shaw never asked what she said. He had found an old analog player buried in one of the tower's abandoned data cabinets. After 2 nights of repair, it worked. The first track that played was a slow instrumental loop, ambient chords, soft pulses. He left it running in the background during the evenings now. Aurelian liked it. That morning, she came to him without a word. No preamble, no request. She simply stood behind him as he adjusted a fuser coil near the window, placed her hands on his waist, and leaned her head against his back. He froze, not from discomfort, from the weight of her body settling into him. Not needy, not anxious, just present. "I want all of you," she said. Shaw turned slowly. She stepped back, just enough for him to look at her. She was wearing nothing. Not one of his shirts. Not a wrap. Nothing but her own skin, soft violet in the heater's light, hair loose and damp from a recent wash. Her eyes weren't seductive. They weren't teasing. They were focused, intent. "I want a night," she added. "For us. Not because of anything that came before. Just because I want. He nodded once. She reached forward and unbuttoned his shirt, slow, silent, until her hands met bare skin. Her fingers didn't shake. She touched his chest, then his sides, then slid the fabric off his shoulders. He let her guide it. He undressed the rest of the way himself. They moved to the sleeping mat together. The light was low. The coil heater cast steady amber tones across the blanket. The world outside the tarp was white, silent, irrelevant. Aurelian lay back first. She spread her legs slightly, not in invitation, but in trust. Her arms open to him, her breath already deepening. He leaned over her slowly, his body warm, hands touching her thighs, her waist, the soft underside of her arms. He watched her face every second, gauging, adjusting, asking without words. Her eyes never left his. She guided his hand between her thighs. He slid his fingers along her slowly, carefully, watching her responses. Her lips parted as her hips moved forward gently. She wasn't shy. She wasn't loud. She was fully there, her body no longer bracing, no longer flinching. His other hand slid under her neck, cradling it, lifting her slightly as his mouth brushed her collarbone. He kissed the curve of her shoulder, then the hollow beneath her throat. She arched beneath him, not urgently, but with a deep, rolling need. "I don't want to disappear into you," she whispered. "I want to feel all of it." He moved lower, kissing the inside of her thigh, then her hip, then up again. He took his time. Her fingers gripped the blanket at her sides, pulling tight, then releasing with every breath. He kissed her breasts, slowly, deliberately, his tongue tracing her skin, his hands firm but never forcing. She reached for him. "Now," she said. "Now, please." He entered her slowly. Their bodies fit like they had waited for this. Not just hours, but years. She gasped softly, her hands gripping his back. He paused, buried inside her, letting them both adjust. Their foreheads touched. Breath met breath. She whispered, "Don't stop looking at me." He didn't. They moved together, slow, heavy rhythm, not pounding, not rushed. Just pressure and release. His hips met hers again and again, every thrust deep and full. She groaned softly, her voice catching each time he hit that spot that made her hips tremble. He whispered her name once. She whispered his. Her hands ran through his hair, over his shoulders, down his arms. Her thighs wrapped around his hips, drawing him deeper, harder, until she was trembling under him. He slowed, holding her there, until her breath caught, and then she let go. She came quietly, her body arching, eyes wide open, mouth parted in shock and joy. He held still, letting her feel all of it. Then, gently, he moved again, long, slow thrusts as her nails traced down his back. She whispered, "Finish inside me." He nodded, one hand tangled in her hair, the other gripping her waist. His rhythm deepened. He groaned in her shoulder, body tightening. Then he froze, every muscle taut, and released inside her long, heavy with a shudder. They lay like that for minutes, still joined, skin against skin. After, she curled into him, pressed her face into his neck. "I've never had this," she said. "Not even close." "I haven't either," he replied. They didn't fall asleep right away. They lay under the blanket, still naked, still warm, listening to the wind picking up outside again, but it didn't matter. Inside this space, they weren't survivors. They were lovers. They were partners. They were home. And no one was ever going to take that away from them again.